A persistent feeling of weariness, like an invisible weight pressing down, forces one to maintain a precarious balance, avoiding conflict, demonstrating kindness, understanding, and politeness. These are life principles learned from a young age. A deep-seated belief that good always triumphs, that sincerity and integrity will be rewarded, has taken root in one's mind. But what if this is merely an illusion? A convenient lie designed to make people compliant and controllable? How many times has one had to stay silent to keep the peace? How many times have personal interests been sacrificed to avoid disappointing others? How many times has one endured disrespect, all while maintaining a smile and assuring everyone that everything was fine? Tears, anger, and pride had to be suppressed in the name of a supposed virtue that only made one invisible. It's crucial to realize that the world isn't quick to reward good guys. It values those with strategic thinking. The disillusionment. Experienced in trying to be a good person leads to a realization. The more one strives for universal approval, the less respect one receives in return. Compliancy breeds new demands, and generosity is taken for granted. This is where Machiavelli enters the scene, a thinker often unfairly labeled as a devil. Perhaps he was the first to dare expose the truth about the mechanisms of power, understanding that pure morality, detached from reality, is a dangerous trap. Being a good person doesn't necessarily mean being effective, fair, or worthy. This calls for a frank discussion about why one must stop striving to be a good person. This is not a call for cruelty or insensitivity, but an invitation to awaken, to abandon a naive belief in the world's fairness and the reward for virtue. The truth, however uncomfortable, must be revealed. As long as one tries to please everyone, they remain a hostage to their own kindness, a puppet in someone else's hands. If the exhaustion from exploitation, neglect, and disregard has reached its limit, perhaps it's time for a change. It's time to turn to Machiavelli's wisdom to learn lessons never taught and to take control of one's life. Are you ready to face the truth? Does the world truly value good people? Just look around to see who commands the most admiration, who holds leadership positions, who gains respect and influence. Is it the most generous and compassionate individuals, or those with strategic thinking, assertiveness, and resistance to manipulation? The harsh truth is that the world is governed not by kindness, but by utility. Machiavelli realized this centuries ago, writing The Prince not to teach villainy, but to reveal the rules of the game. And one of the bitterest lessons is that being good isn't enough. In many cases, it's the shortest path to oblivion. One can spend a lifetime being loyal, kind, and understanding, giving their best, helping others without expecting anything in return. But the moment one ceases to be useful, they will be forgotten, replaced, and silenced, without a hint of remorse. The world evaluates a person not by their moral qualities, but by what they provide, their influence, and their impact on others. In society, it's common to observe a pattern where those considered good guys relentlessly pursue the object of their attention, constantly justifying themselves and apologizing, striving to prove their worth. Meanwhile, individuals who can set boundaries, confidently say no, and clearly state their needs command deserved respect. They possess their own voice and personal space. Why is this the case? The reason lies in the fact that boundless kindness is often perceived as a sign of weakness. Those who never resist or pose a threat are simply not taken seriously. They are viewed more as a resource than a complete person, as a tool rather than an individual. One can go to great lengths trying to please everyone, but if they don't demonstrate strength and a readiness for consequences, others will exploit them without hesitation. This might seem cruel, but it's the harsh reality. Niccolò Machiavelli, the renowned political thinker, asserted that a leader should strive not for universal love, but for instilling fear if forced to choose between the two. What did he mean by this? True respect stems from the recognition that you are dealing with someone who possesses power and the ability to act. Someone who cannot be trampled upon with impunity. Someone who is not merely a pawn in someone else's game. And this applies to each of us. If a person continues to live with the sole purpose of pleasing others, they will continue to be perceived as someone easily cast aside. It's not that they are a bad person, but rather that the world does not reward those who dissolve themselves into others. It's time to understand the origin of this unhealthy compulsion to constantly seek approval. For behind outward kindness lies something far deeper, something that may have undermined one's own endeavors for years. And this is precisely what needs to be examined. We must delve into the psychological roots of those who live to please everyone, and uncover why goodness is often merely a disguised form of fear. A person is not born with an innate desire to please everyone. They were taught this, and even worse, it was conditioned. From childhood, they learned that approval came at a price, giving up a part of themselves. Forced smiles, suppressed desires, unspoken opinions, all in the name of others' approval. From admonitions like, "Don't do that, it's not nice," to praises like, "Be kind, don't talk back, you're so polite." And so, gradually, one molded themselves to fit others' expectations. However, no one warned them that constantly striving to please is an emotional trap, a psychological prison built from poisoned compliments and punishments disguised as upbringing. They learned that if they pleased others, they would be loved, but if they showed anger, set boundaries, or acted selfishly, they would be rejected. So, they did what any rational person would do to survive. They adapted. The problem is that this adaptation evolved into subservience. Now one no longer knows how to say no without feeling guilty. They feel responsible for the well-being of others, even if it destroys them internally. They get upset but keep it to themselves. They become disappointed but forgive too quickly. They exhaust themselves trying to maintain the image others expect of them. Not because it's their true self, but because this is what, as they learned, gave them a sense of security. But here's the reality check. This isn't kindness, it's fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being unloved, fear of being perceived as a bad person, fear of being who they truly are with their desires, their anger, their boundaries, their voice. And this fear has turned them into someone who self-sabotages, who hides behind socially acceptable but emotionally destructive behavior. And most tragically, they don't even realize they're doing it. They call it empathy, but it's fear of confrontation. They call it understanding, but it's fear of abandonment. They call it kindness, but it's fear of not being good enough. Their kindness is, in reality, a mask, an unconscious strategy to avoid the pain of rejection. But this mask comes at a very high price. It suffocates their authenticity, their strength, and their dignity. And if they don't remove this mask, it will cling to their skin, it will become their identity. And one day, they will look in the mirror and no longer recognize who they truly are. However, there is a way out of this situation. To find it, one should turn to the legacy of a man who deeply understood the influence of image, perception, and strategic thinking, Niccolo Machiavelli. Let's delve into the essence of his teachings and explore how The Prince can teach us to break free from the urge to appear flawless and to earn respect for our true selves. If you strive to live by principles of virtue, hoping for recognition from others, pause and reflect. Over 5 centuries ago, Machiavelli warned, "A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good." Effectiveness in the game of life requires a strategic approach, understanding that people act not from altruistic motives, but under the influence of their own interests, fears, and desire for power. In The Prince, Machiavelli notes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few perceive what you really are." This phrase strikes like a blow, shattering the illusion that sincerity and honesty alone can secure respect. The harsh reality is that people perceive not your intentions, but your outward appearance, your image, and your influence. Even if you are the most just person, you will be perceived as weak if you do not demonstrate strength. Possessing the most generous heart, you will remain unnoticed if you do not command respect. This is why a prince, or any individual seeking to control their life, must not be naive. They should display virtue when it is advantageous and employ strategic thinking when necessary. Machiavelli argued that a prince must skillfully employ the nature of beasts, combining the cunning of a fox with the might of a lion. The fox can discern traps and act subtly, while the lion instills fear and demonstrates strength. Machiavelli does not advocate being solely one or the other, but rather combining these qualities. Be shrewd enough to recognize manipulation and strong enough to make others think twice before trying to take advantage of you. Strive for respect, understanding that the virtue Machiavelli spoke of differs from what moralists preach. It is virtù, a combination of courage, intellect, audacity, and self-control. It is the ability to act dispassionately when necessary, and to understand that sometimes a display of severity is the only way to maintain order, dictated not by malice, but by wisdom. Machiavelli wrote, "A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good." Perhaps you've experienced this yourself, trying to be good in every situation, only to encounter abuse, indifference, and injustice. The world doesn't always play fair, and if you continue to act as if everyone is honest, you will always lose. This doesn't mean abandoning your values, but rather refusing to let them become shackles. Begin to act from a position of strength, considering how your kindness is perceived and utilized by others. Machiavelli was not a cynic. He was a realist. He saw human nature unvarnished and wrote The Prince as a guide to survival in a world where appearance is power and weakness cloaked in virtue is a death sentence. However, a natural question might arise in the reader's mind. Is there a middle ground? How can one maintain humanity without falling into the abyss of naivety or becoming a callous cynic? It's crucial to dispel the misconception that we face a dilemma, either kindness or cruelty. There is an alternative path, and its starting point is honesty with oneself. A dangerous misconception, poisoning the existence of many, is widespread. It's the belief that kindness is synonymous with subservience. Supposedly, to be considered a good person, One must passively accept life's blows, forgive all wrongs, and keep their feelings to themselves so as not to disrupt a fragile peace. However, this is not an expression of kindness, but rather naivety bordering on cowardice, disguised as virtue. Without realizing this fine line, one risks becoming an emotional doormat for others. True kindness does not imply self-destruction. It is built upon awareness, clarity of thought, and the ability to make choices. Being kind doesn't mean being everyone's favorite. Always ready to help, smiling, and sacrificing yourself for those who wouldn't lift a finger for you. This is, rather, self-abnegation, a manifestation of emotional dependency veiled as morality. A naive person believes that others will treat them with the same sincerity they offer. They are convinced that the world is fair and that integrity will surely be rewarded. They expect gratitude, reciprocity, and attention, but ultimately face bitter disappointment because they project non-existent noble qualities onto others. True kindness manifests differently. It possesses firmness, knows how to say no, and when to walk away. It recognizes that not everyone is worthy of its expressions, and that lavishing one's best qualities on those who offer nothing in return is not generosity, but recklessness. A person can be fair, compassionate, and upright, yet still command respect and even fear. They possess a strong character, know their worth, and do not allow themselves to be manipulated. Niccolo Machiavelli, whom contemporaries considered cruel, by no means despised virtue. He despised naivety, understanding that in a world full of predators, kindness without strength is merely a tempting morsel for hungry beasts. Therefore, it's worth asking, does your kindness protect you or make you vulnerable? Does it strengthen you or destroy you? If your concept of kindness implies a life full of injustice, contentment with little, and guilt over felt anger, then it is not kindness, but submission. However, there is a way out. There exists a point of equilibrium where there's no need to abandon your essence, nor to bow down to anyone. This is a place where you can act boldly, consciously, and with developed emotional intelligence. Next, we will explore this path to understand how to stop being good to your own detriment without becoming a villain, and how to take control of your life without betraying your principles. If you seek to regain self-respect, then this is where your journey to transformation begins. Often, people who realize their excessive compliance make a dangerous mistake. They believe the only way to stop being good is to become cold, insensitive, and even cruel. This is the so-called pendulum effect. After years of being exploited, one concludes that the only way out is to become their opposite, tough, indifferent, and calculating. However, this is another trap. By abandoning their true essence, one does not become stronger, but merely protects themselves through denial. This is not freedom, but trauma disguised as power. True freedom arises when a person achieves inner harmony and integrity. It's the moment when actions are dictated not by a desire to please others, but by a sincere wish to follow one's own path. The essence is not in the good-bad dichotomy, but in achieving authenticity. The reflection in the mirror should be of a person capable of kindness, yet not passive, compassionate, yet not all-forgiving, ready to help, yet not debasing themselves in expectation of recognition. So how does one stop playing the good role without betraying their true essence? First and foremost, one must recognize the value of their own voice. From childhood, the idea is imposed that expressing discontent, setting personal boundaries, or disagreeing with others' opinions is a sign of selfishness. But this is a lie. True selfishness lies in expecting someone to silently watch as others make decisions for them. Expressing one's stance, defending one's convictions, affirm, "I will not accept this." These are manifestations of dignity and self-respect. Secondly, one must learn to say no. This is one of the most liberating actions, and it doesn't have to be aggressive or defiant. A calm, confident, and unequivocal no holds more power than 1,000 excuses. It clearly demonstrates the presence of personal boundaries, and those who can set them are respected. Those who don't are exploited. Thirdly, it's important to pay attention to how others react to these changes. These individuals serve as a kind of indicator. If a person begins to show their true self and someone accuses them of having changed, become strange or selfish, it means their previous compliance benefited someone. The changes disrupt an unspoken agreement that allowed them to be used for others' purposes, and this causes discomfort. But don't be fooled. This is a sign of progress. Fourthly, one must stop striving for universal approval. Not everyone will understand the transformation taking place, and that's perfectly normal. One is not obligated to conform to the image others have created of them. Their loyalty should be directed towards their own truth, their inner world, and their emotional well-being. Fifthly, replace the pursuit of approval with a commitment to authenticity. By acting genuinely, one might displease some, but they will earn the respect of those who truly matter. Furthermore, they will begin to respect themselves, and that is a respect no one can take away. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote his works not to teach people cruelty, but to warn against naivety. And the greatest naivety is to believe that being good is enough to gain respect in this world. It is not. It requires courage to reject the role of a pleaser and strength to be oneself without asking anyone for permission. But this path is not yet complete. The decisive moment arrives. The choice between continuing self-destruction and definitively taking control of one's life. In conclusion, it's time to be brutally honest with oneself. How much longer will one pretend to be the good guy? How long will they sacrifice their energy, their voice, and their dignity to maintain an image imposed by others? Do they consider this virtue or nobility? It is a prison, a psychological and emotional cage adorned with fake compliments, where they are applauded for being harmless, predictable, and posing no threat. The author boldly states a harsh truth of life that many prefer to silence. No one will arrive with gratitude for the sacrifices made, nor offer a well-deserved rest. As long as one allows themselves to be used, there will always be someone to take advantage. This is not an act of malice, but an objective reality that disregards good intentions. One can continue to adhere to the societal ideal of the good person, being calm, patient, understanding, and always ready to say yes. However, such a path leads to disappointment, resentment, and a feeling of invisibility. The alternative is to awaken and realize that kindness should not be a burden. One must begin to act consciously, decisively, and firmly, selectively demonstrating generosity and setting boundaries. It's crucial to stop giving more than you receive in return and to stop seeking approval from others. The world respects those who respect themselves, and true freedom comes when one no longer needs to ask for permission to exist. In conclusion, the author poses rhetorical questions. urging self-reflection. When was the last time you said no without feeling guilty? When did you put your own interests first? When did you do something solely for yourself, without worrying about others' reactions? These questions prompt one to reflect on their own life and the necessity of change.